Welcome back to part 2.
This is the second part of our conversation about spiritual beings. We talked a lot last week, and we had a lot more to talk about, so we split it into 2. So we're just going to pick up right where we left off. So thanks for joining us for part 2 of our conversation about spiritual beings.
And if you didn't listen to part 1, you really should do that.
Yes.
Because it probably won't make a lot of sense. So go do that. Even though every time I hear that on a podcast, I never do it.
Really?
No, I know. Well, not never, but most of the time not. I don't think so.
Oh, whenever I see something as part 2, I'm always
That's true.
like...
If I see part 2, I do it. But if I'm listening to a podcast and they go, oh, you should go listen to this other one, like I don't exit out of the podcast and go listen.
Oh. But, don't be like Justin. Do your homework.
Yeah, exactly. Be
Watch
like
part 1.
All right.
Job 1:6. One day, the Elohim came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them.
There's so much there's so much in that.
So this is Job, which
is it Hasatan or is it just Satan?
Pretty famously starts with Satan, which means like adversary.
Mm-hmm.
So like an enemy essentially comes to God and says,
and it's Hasatan, the direct article.
Yes. So like
the adversary,
like capital T.
Mm-hmm.
The
definite article. This is some dirty grammar stuff. Indefinite versus definite article. If I say like, hand me a pen, I just mean like any pen. It's just a pen. It's indefinite. If I say, hand me the pen, I'm like referring to a specific pen. It's called the definite article. Hebrew has the same indefinite, definite articles, and this is the definite article. So it's not saying like a adversary came, the adversary came with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is painting like a picture of a spiritual realm where God, capital G God, is in like conversation and interacting with these other spiritual beings as well. And there's like a group of them.
And Satan comes with. Satan, the adversary comes with.
Satan comes with.
Which is interesting because then it's not clear. Is it like a group of good Elohim, right? It's Elohim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Wait, what? Oh, it's the sons of Elohim.
The sons of Elohim. So
crazy. Okay, so the same sons of Elohim that are talked about in both the Psalm and in Genesis 6.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of sons of Elohim, which is something, come to present themselves. But then it's not clear, like, is Satan like does he like sneak in with them? Or is it like, oh, and also, just so you know, one of those sons of Elohim was the Satan.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's clear in here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, verse 7 follows with the direct, like the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from?
Is that like what are you doing here?
I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Or is it like, what were you up to today? I don't know the answer to that.
The earth.
Yeah. And I feel like that could be taken both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here? Where'd you come from? Like, well, I was on the earth and now I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so we bring that one up just to highlight the interplay in the spiritual realm that's happening. But then, along with the interplay that happens with like humans in the spiritual realm too. Because this conversation goes on to have lots of implications for our friend Job.
But it all starts with Elohim coming before God to present themselves.
Yes.
And then God asking the adversary question. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. So we talked about humans and spiritual beings. Both. There's humans and spiritual beings that are in partnership, working with God, and there's humans and spiritual beings that are in rebellion against God.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about last week how these wandering in rebellion kind of spiritual beings are set on wanting humans to have the same fate, essentially, of being separated from God and not not doing what God wants, essentially.
Which sounds really weird until you put it into words in the New Testament that maybe feel way more comfortable. Right? When we think of angel or demon, we think of, angel or demon, there's like these spiritual beings that are lesser than God, but they're still somehow, they're not human, right? Like they're a spiritual, like what other word did you use? Spiritual being maybe sounds strange, but we call ourselves human beings because we're these like physical creatures. So we all kind of already have a category in our head for a spiritual being that is both good and a spiritual being that is bad, which would be angels and demons. We just bring a lot of baggage with angels and demons. And we don't always connect them to spiritual beings.
Yeah. And I think to even broaden that, like, there's angels. There's like lots of categories of like spiritual beings, like and angels,
cherubim and seraphim.
Yeah.
Or just sons of Elohim.
Yes.
Which are like, what does that mean?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Great question.
I think we think of like angels are good spiritual beings and demons are bad spiritual beings. But like there is like some more nuance to it beyond that of there's like a whole different category of spiritual beings that we're given, and we've just kind
of latched onto those names.
Yes, and we see some doing God's will, and normally what we see is we see angel, like those are maybe some of the more famous stories from the Bible have angels that are like clearly doing God's will, doing what God wanted them to do, and then we see demons who are doing not what God wants them to do. So that's where that like really those really like defined boxes come from, I think, but there's a little bit more nuance to it than that.
Sorry, you didn't bring up maybe that was intentional. A specific verse. The Witch of Endor. Do you know that one?
No.
Ready for just a wild. So it's 1 Samuel 28. If you're ready for a wild story. This is in the Bible, not making this up. Wonder if I should start with some context. Yeah, I'll start with some context. We have time. This is now part 2, probably.
Yes.
At some point, we'll have to, maybe at the end of this podcast, we should intro the next one.
Yeah.
So we can transition. There's just so much going on. And so while Gabby is kind of finding this verse, if this sounds really strange to you, I'll remind you again that the idea is that God is a being different than us, and he's the ruler over everything.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And we have words that we've grabbed onto to try to understand, like, how does this whole God in a spiritual realm and humans work? And some of those are really helpful, and some of those can actually be more confusing than helpful. So we're just trying to talk about Elohim and spiritual beings and what that looks like. So 1 Samuel 28, verse 1. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. So Philistines, bad guys, Israel, good guys in the story right now. Achish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." Achish replied, "Very well, I'll make you my bodyguard for life." So there's this war happening. David's going to fight, doing a good job. Now Samuel was dead. It's like Dickens. Marley was dead as a door, which is like fascinating because what does that, like, if you know a Christmas story? No, what's it called? The Christmas.
Yeah.
It's not a Christmas story. That's
a Christmas.
Why can I not remember the name of it? It's not a Christmas story. Dickens. Christmas Carol.
Yeah. Okay.
Christmas story is the like you'll shoot your eye out.
Okay. I always watched the Barbie version growing up, and it's like Barbie's A Christmas Carol.
I watched the Muppets. So.
I had Christmas Carol in my head, but then I didn't want to say it because I was like, what if that's only the Barbie version? And then I was really stupid. But yeah.
No,
anyway.
I see the Muppets Christmas Carol, whatever I think of the Christmas Carol. Have you ever watched that one?
Yes, I have.
Fantastic.
I think of the Barbie one.
Okay. They're both great. Watch either. I'm sure they're good.
You've never seen the Barbie one.
No, I haven't. I've never seen it.
The Barbie one is great, but yeah.
I'll have to watch it sometime. But it's interesting. In A Christmas Carol opens up with, I think it's Marley. Is it just Marley? Sorry, maybe this is a huge like tangent, but it's a narrative. Like, the Bible does things narratively that you should key in on. It's a great opening line. Why can I not find? Come on, this is. Oh yeah, Marley was dead to begin with. So literally, like the book A Christmas Carol starts out. Here's this character. They were dead. Why did they set that up? Because a little bit later in the story, the ghost of Marley appears. So we have the story. Samuel, who was a prophet, who led Israelites, he appointed Saul as a king, and then he appointed David as a king. And so it jumps in the story. David's off fighting, and we get told Samuel was dead. And all Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. So Saul had exiled them. He had kicked them out. He said, no more. And a spiritist or medium was someone who asked the dead people questions. And again, we have that kind of modern still. And in your mind, I don't know what category you put that in. You might put that in, these were people who tried to talk to dead people and instead demons talked to them, or maybe we would call Elohim. Or you could say they tried to talk to dead people and they did talk to dead people. Or you could just, maybe you think they were charlatans who made stuff up and wanted money from people. I don't know. Anyway, Saul kicks them out of the land. The Philistines assemble and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and set up camp at Gilboa. So these two armies are getting ready to fight. Saul saw the Philistine army. He was afraid and terror filled his heart. So Saul's worried that they're going to lose this war. So he inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. So basically, he tried to ask God and God didn't tell him. You ever have that happen? I have all the time.
Yeah.
Try to ask God a question and he doesn't answer. Saul then said to his attendants, find me a woman who's a medium. So like going back to Genesis 3, of trying to get something from somewhere other than God. Mm-hmm. Saul, pretty quickly, this is kind of an attribute of Saul actually, is he's impatient. And so he decides to find a medium, which is evil under like the law God gave people. So he told them very explicitly, don't try to consult with dead spirits to find out answers. Go to Yahweh for answers. Find me a woman who's a medium so I may go and inquire of her. There is one in Endor, he said. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes. So he's even doesn't want anyone to know he's doing this. And at night, he and two men went to the woman. Consult a spirit for me, he said, and bring up for me the one I name. But the woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. He must have a good disguise. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap? Which is fascinating to think about. Yeah. If you remember talking about test versus trap, like the idea is she's thinking, you're looking for the spiritists because they're not supposed to be here. And you're asking me to do this. It's like a raid, like a cop, undercover cop going in and be like, hey, can I have some drugs? Yeah. Sure. Then the SWAT busts in the door or whatever. That's a trap. They're not actually wanting drugs to get caught. They're doing it just to catch someone. So she thinks you're just here to, catch me. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death? Saul swore to her by the Lord. You're supposed to do that? Saul's a great king. Yeah. As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this. Then the woman asked, he's basically saying, I swear to God, I am not an undercover cop. That's literally what he's saying. Then the woman asked, whom shall I bring up for you? Bring up Samuel. Remember, Samuel is dead. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, don't be afraid. What do you see? So she sees Samuel, and then she somehow knows he's Saul. I don't really understand how. But anyway, the king said to her, don't be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said, I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth. Here's what's crazy. What she says is, I see an Elohim coming out of the earth. So this woman who talks to spirits, spiritual beings, which is forbidden by God to go to another spiritual being for some kind of help or answer or whatever. When she sees the spirit of Samuel, which it's not actually clear whether it is or isn't actually Samuel's spirit, but the point being, when she sees a spiritual being, she freaks out and says, I see an Elohim. So I think this is one of the stories you can go to really clearly see, Elohim was used by people in the ancient world to mean a spiritual being. Just a creature that isn't human. Fascinating. This is just such a crazy story. Sorry. Stories are wild. This is one of the stories where when I was younger, and even now I read it and I'm like, I don't know, dude, I'm just going to I guess I won't play with a Ouija board. I don't know. Keep reading.
Yeah. Well, it's,
I love it. What does he look like? He's an old man with a robe. Then Saul knew it was Samuel. I'm like, I'm sure there's more context to that, but it's an example where we probably miss so much. It sounds ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm imagining like dad and being like, oh, he's wearing khakis and a polo shirt. Oh, it must be my dad. That's what he wanted. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole point to go to this isn't to fully explain everything going on in this story, although it is part of Saul's downfall because he doesn't rely on Yahweh as his Elohim. But it points out that Elohim were complicated. It's a complicated word with a wide range of meaning.
Yeah.
So. Sorry, I just took us on like a huge tangent.
No, that's okay. Now I'm pondering this. Yeah, he saw the Philistine army. He was afraid with terror in his heart.
Mm-hmm. And it says, like, in verse 15, it says, Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Samuel said, why do you consult me now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? Like, in the narrative, Samuel kind of acts like Samuel, which is interesting. It's all so connected. Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. That's the like descendants of the Nephilim or the giants, the people God that were doing evil that God wanted out of the land. The Lord has done this to you today. He even says, tomorrow you and your sons will be with me, which is what happens. Saul dies.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely clear if this is Samuel or not, but it sure seems to be Samuel. Which raises a whole another host of questions, but
yeah.
Now everyone's just like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. And I think a lot about, I don't know, to maybe like try and ground this a little bit. I think the practical application of this story is like, so often we want what we want and we're going to get it however we want it, like whatever we think it takes to get it. And then like sometimes even when it means explicitly doing something that God has told us not to do.
Yep.
And then we scratch our heads and say, why did God do this to me?
Yeah.
Which that's essentially the arc of
blame God. I mean, that's what Eve does, is blames what Adam does. The woman you put here with me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a gift, it was a trick. Yeah, he like blames God for a gift. Yeah, you did this.
Yeah.
And that's the theme, like the Israelites going to Egypt. It's a common theme of running to something else other than God.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to come back after that.
Well, do we jump into humans and spirit? So there's like, it's very clear reading the Old Testament, especially the New Testament, that there are other beings than just humans and Yahweh. Like it's not just physical human beings and Yahweh, God. There's these like weird creatures and there's things happening and there's like, I mean, I think it's Elijah with like the mountainside being filled with the army of God.
Yeah.
There's stuff with Balaam and this like cursing and weird donkey that talks. And I don't know, there are a lot of these type of things going on.
Yes.
Again, one of my favorite is the Egyptian sorcerers that do magic. Like, they do something by the power of an evil being. They're able, it's not like they did card tricks to like make a snake come out. Right, they actually did magic. So that's the ground set. There are spiritual beings, Elohim, that exist. Yeah.
And so one of like the thrusts of the narrative, like this is the thrust of the narrative of the Bible essentially, is like this conflict that's happening between people and spiritual beings who are partnering with God and people and spiritual beings who are not, and are not just not partnering with God, but by extension means that they're actively working against what God is doing in the world. And that's set up, and I'm sure you talked about this. So do you want to chat through Genesis 3:15 a little bit? So this is post fruit incident. PR disaster.
PR disaster.
And this is part of God's response. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life.
So much right there too. So if you take this being, which I think the New Testament confirms very clearly, as a spiritual being, which again, I'll talk about it, but seraphim, it's about snakes were often depicted as spiritual beings in other religions nearby.
With
and
wings.
With wings, yeah, which is where that comes into play. And then even in the Bible, seraphim, you might be familiar with that word, which we sometimes think of as an angel, but a seraphim was a burning one. It's like a fiery one. And snakes were called like burning ones because when you got bit, there's poison or even, it burned. So this curse to crawl on your belly, when you're imagining a world filled with flying snakes that are spiritual beings in other religions, it's a curse to lose, like this being has lost its wings in some way, which we still have as like a metaphor for angels to like lose their wings.
That's true.
Interesting.
That's funny.
And eat dust is like I win. Like, I don't know, it's like pushing someone down in the dirt and I'm going to that stupid song. Sorry, and then verse 15.
Yeah. And I will put enmity, which that's kind of
fun
a complicated word that we don't really use anymore in our day-to-day speech. But I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. So essentially, this is the verse that outlines the rest of the biblical conflict. Essentially, the rest of the tension in the biblical narrative is this tension being played out over and over and over again? Is this enmity between,
which is hatred or conflict? Like enmity is like conflict. So there's even a verse, I was looking it up, where they say if somebody without enmity pushes someone else and something happens, the idea of like you're not meaning to hurt them, you just accidentally push them, like without conflict. And then I think of like sports teams. Like you can tell when there's enmity between two sports teams when it gets really like hockey and they throw the gloves down. Like,
I think of the games we play on Wednesday nights.
Yeah. Like it's all fun and games. Then someone like hits somebody else too hard at the noodle. And so they hit them harder. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have just gone from fun to enmity, hatred, conflict. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great framework to give for that. I don't remember what I was going to say.
I love that the gloves are coming off. Like that's kind of what God's saying.
Yes.
Like between the offspring of the woman and the offspring of the man, the gloves are coming off. Like we're not playing around anymore. It's going to be a fight. And we can use that, like the gloves are coming off. We usually use it in like a joking way, but it's pretty brutal in the story and that comes out.
Yes.
And yeah, there's so much even in so like offspring is seed. And it has a like, it's either singular or plural. Our word seed kind of has this. We do use seed sometimes, but you could say like a bag of seed. Is like the plural, like how deer, it's not deers, it's deer. So there's gonna be enmity between like the children of the women and offspring, like the future generations, and then also the future generations of the serpent. And it's even interesting because the striking is the same word. I mean, I'll probably talk about this. I probably did talk about this. Maybe I didn't, I don't know.
Enmity and strike?
Well, strike is the same word. It says crush your head and strike his heel, but it's the same word.
Yeah.
But it's just the location of where it's happening that
I see. Yes.
That does it. But yeah. There's conflict now between the serpent and the woman and their like children.
Yeah. And then that's what we follow all throughout the story. So another throwback to the very first episode. I'll share the same thing that I shared that episode. You'll probably remember once I start saying it.
Okay.
But the story of David and Goliath. And how,
keep going.
Okay, well, basically, when in that story, one of the things that is described over and over about Goliath is like the bronze that he has on.
Yeah.
He has all this bronze
I probably made the exact same,
like,
when you said it last time.
Like a bronze sword, and it's like bronze, basically all over the passage. And the word bronze in Hebrew is really similar to the word for serpent in Hebrew. So essentially, it's like they repeat bronze over and over again to like give you the idea of like we're talking about bronze, but we're also not talking about bronze right now.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening in the story is that David cuts off the head, crushes the head of the bronze man, the serpent man, basically.
Yeah.
Is what that happens in that story. So this sets up for us
interesting, yeah.
Essentially this like narrative of like, okay, we're looking for someone who can crush the serpent. We're looking for someone who can cut off the head. And And the Bible, like throughout the Bible, like offers like different people, like different people rise up that we're supposed to read and go, oh, is this the one? Like, is
David probably being like the chief?
Yes, definitely.
Like, oh, he's got to be the one.
Yes. But then
he sees
and David.
Good.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Sorry.
And David does like pass a lot of those tests, so to speak. Like he does do lots of things that, as you read the David narrative, like you would be reading it and being like,
that's actually how I started.
This is the guy.
That's how I started last week's teaching. I don't know if I will today, but with David in the cave, seeing Saul, and being like, oh, I could kill him right now.
Yeah.
But I know I'm not supposed to, and so he chooses not to.
Yes.
So he passes that test.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So David's given lots of test choices. Ultimately, he fails. He fails in again a scene that very much
sees
mirrors the
the
fall in Genesis 3, where he sees a woman who's good and pleasing to the eye. And now I'm realizing how similar it is to that Genesis 6 part too. Like really similar.
Which part?
Well,
of like the...
It's specifically about seeing beautiful women.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, same,
6.
like, yeah, it's true, because Eve isn't about a woman. But if you take the analogy that people are trees, which is really all over the Bible, that like the interplay of the images happens a lot. Yeah, to see something that's good and take. And that's, the weird thing is we missed that as well, because what's the Bathsheba passage?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
Again, I say it all the time. Google is great for figuring out which verse to go to, not great for what that means.
Yeah. I've
2 Samuel 11.
Typed many Google searches that say Bible verse where blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Or you type in like your best guess at what it is, and it takes you there.
2 Samuel 18. You said.
Yeah. Evening came. David arose from his bed, walked around on the roof, which was potentially a garden, by the way.
Yeah.
And from the roof, he saw a woman bathing. So he sees a naked woman, which again, not an accidental image. And she was Tov. Meod Tov. In appearance. She was good in appearance. So like we miss, so again, like that's the translation. They're like the translators aren't trying to mess with you by translating it beautiful. Like that's what Meod Tov meant. Like very beautiful in appearance, or very good in appearance meant beautiful. That's a phrase they'd use.
Yeah.
But then what we miss, like if they just wrote she was very good in appearance, we'd be like, that's a weird way to say that. But what we miss then is that he sees something good and takes it.
Yeah.
Something good that's not his and takes it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So these images, these like desires, these stories are very much linked with
so it is, sorry. So again, in verse, so he finds out who it is, and then in verse in 2 Samuel 11:4, it translates it, then David sent messengers to get her. What word do you think it used?
Take?
Yep. Lakah, exact same word.
Yeah.
Take. So you have a naked woman, a man seeing a naked woman that's not his. She's good. He takes her.
Good. Yeah.
Like it's the story again. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it leads to death too. Even like if it follows almost like the Cain and Abel. Like,
well, I was thinking he tries to fix the problem himself. Just like Adam and Eve try to like cover themselves up. He brings Uriah back from war and goes, go sleep with your wife. Yeah. Thinking like, I mean, if you don't know the story, what his plan is he gets Uriah drunk to go sleep with his wife, thinking, like they didn't have DNA tests, like paternity tests back then.
Yeah.
So if this guy goes and like sleeps with Bathsheba and then she has a kid, they'll think it's their kid. And they probably all looked similar because it was a similar like family. Yeah. Races were, people were more homogenous looking in those times. Just we're America, kind of a melting pot. So people look really different. But that's crazy. And then it does not work at all. Yeah. And it all explodes.
Yes. Because Uriah is like righteous. Like he refuses to do it because he's like, no.
Too good of a guy.
Yeah, yeah. Like my peers are on the battlefront right now. Like it would be wrong of me to like essentially betray them in that way. But,
so he kills him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy to think about how far David falls so quickly when he goes from like being the righteous man to returning evil to a man who was doing what was right, a righteous man.
Yeah. And that's the thing with David, where we started this with you saying person after person comes and you go, is this the one? Is this the one? And is this the one? I mean, Moses again is another character who, is this the one? And David, I think it's the farthest to be like, yes, 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 yes. It's got to be the one. No, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And that's where it even picks up. Like for a long time, it's the offspring of Eve, but it turns into really quickly like the son of David. And that's where you get that line that Jesus then fulfills.
Yes. Yeah.
The son of David. Because they're waiting for one in the line of David who will do what David didn't.
Yes. Yes. And the evil, that we're talking about crushing is not just like it's a spiritual evil. Yeah. I think I don't want to lose the plot there.
That's the evil one, who's then also the embodiment in some ways of sin, as we'll talk about.
Yes.
Next week, Genesis 4.
Yeah. So like a spiritual being, that's what the snake is, and that's what like the offspring of the snake represents. Like it's not just an intangible bad like desire that we have within us. Like that's a piece of it, but essentially what the Bible is saying is that there's like there's something deeper happening beyond just that desire. Like there's almost like spiritual evil that's in part what like animates that desire.
And I'll talk about that
in humans.
I guess the second part will come out after that one, but
yes,
I'll probably use William's line of the sin.
The sin, yeah,
for Cain and Abel, because it's I think a good description of it.
Yes.
Do you want to end with Luke 10?
Yeah.
Or did you want to go into 3:15 and 4:7?
I want to connect to 4:7 quick first, because I mean, especially since you'll talk about this with Cain and Abel.
Yep.
I'm sure as well, but essentially in verse 7, what happens is God goes to Cain and says, if you do what's right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So I think when we think of sin, it's like using sin as in like moral failure. Like it's not necessarily like talking about sin as a spiritual being, but I think the imagery does connect it to that serpent ideology. Not ideology, but the idea of the image of the serpent.
Because the doing right and wrong is about actions.
Yes.
Are you saying the sin crouching at your door is about choices or about a spiritual evil?
Well, I'm talking about like ruling over it. Like almost like crushing the serpent's head is in part like it's being over the serpent. Instead of it
ruling over you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm connecting it to Romans, the New Testament, the idea of slavery, because that's the theme that gets picked up in the New Testament is we're slaves to sin. And so what happens when humans don't rule over sin? Sin rules over us. And if you're ruled over, you're a slave, a servant. Like that's the metaphor.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, that's probably not as explicit of a connection as maybe in my head it was. But let's jump to Luke. Let's jump to Luke 10. This is an instance where this comes after like a pretty famous verse where Jesus talks about the harvest being plentiful, but the workers are few, which gets used a lot to talk about like there are lots of people who want to respond to who God is, but not lots of people are willing to go and tell people who God is and what He's doing. So with Jesus, he says that line, and then he essentially sends out 72 people to go and do that, and to announce who God is, what He's doing, and help free people from, to use that like slave analogy, to free people from sin, from like spiritual darkness, spiritual evil.
Yeah.
And when they come back, so I'll pick it up in verse 17. The 72 returned with joy and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." He replied, Jesus being he, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you."
Crazy.
Yeah.
And that's why we were saying like it it's in the New Testament narrative. So if you hear the Old Testament narrative, and I don't know what your understanding of it is, or maybe you go, yeah, that sounds weird, or maybe you're stretching these words to be weird. This is Jesus being pretty explicit about spiritual evil.
Yeah, and you're going to trample on the snake.
Yep.
Like you're gonna trample on snakes and scorpions. These.
Yep. Connecting it to
Yep. Which snake is like a really explicit, more obvious connection, but scorpions and like other like dangerous creatures were sometimes used to talk about like sin and kind of spiritual evil. And yeah, Jesus is saying essentially, when you go out in my name, that authority to like crush the serpent, you have that now too.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Tread on serpents. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I think you can read this and just say, oh, like they didn't have to be afraid of rattlesnakes. And I think there's, much deeper thing going on here.
Yeah.
That they don't have to be scared of spiritual evil.
Yes. So I think sometimes how like demons and maybe spiritual evil gets talked about is like this maybe like scary, intangible thing. I think of like, I don't know, horror movies or even, but even sometimes it gets connected to like experiences that we have. Like I think a lot of times like mental health has been like, kind of maybe like literally demonized in that way and like spiritualized in that way. But yeah, I think one of the things that's really powerful here is that like we don't have to be ruled over like by spiritual evil. Yeah.
That's good. I've never noticed this before. It's very apparent to me because we've been walking through all of these. But he says at the very end in verse 20, however, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And the idea that, okay, if the stars in the sky, the creation of the heavens, is where these spiritual beings reside, don't rejoice that you are above the spiritual beings. Rejoice that your name is above, like written above. I don't know, like the connection there seems very obvious to me now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't even really notice that. That's why I didn't include it, because I was like, oh, that's kind of weird too.
Yeah. There's a lot of strange things. And that's, there's a lot to understand about the Bible, and it keeps giving.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And now even going on, at that time, she was full of joy through the Holy Spirit, said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children.
There's heaven and earth again. I use the line from Bible Project where they say, you'll never find heaven and hell together. You'll always find heaven and earth.
Yeah. Yes.
There it is again. So spiritual beings. So as we go through the story, I think we can probably wrap up episode 2. I'm guessing it's been a while. This has been fun though. Thanks for this. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That as we go through the story, we're going to hopefully point out a bunch of different places where this comes into play, and that there's spiritual evil that is contesting with us, and that someone will come and destroy.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we already kind of spoiled it, right? Like
Jesus
is going to come and destroy it. And but like the good news, and why I love this passage so much, is like Jesus doesn't share that. He doesn't keep that power for himself. Like just like how God doesn't keep his creation to himself. He shares in his power and authority over creation. And Jesus does the same thing with his power and authority over spiritual evil.
Yep.
He says, you now share in that with me, and you have authority over it. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't know. I just can't believe how highly Jesus views us, how highly God views
us. Dirtbags.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what that psalm was, that we had, Psalm 8.
Yes.
What is man? What are humans that you are mindful of us when there's these Elohim out there?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And not only is God mindful of us, he gives us authority over the evil Elohim.
To rule. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, if you have questions, you have to have questions. I have questions.
Yeah, same.
There's got to be something where you're like, that didn't make sense. I don't like how that makes me feel. I'm confused. I don't know, whatever. Or what about this idea? Because there's like, this is pretty complicated stuff. And we're not claiming to be experts on what we're trying to just point out is it's easy as Westerners who don't think about spirituality a lot to miss what an ancient person would have seen, which is that there's spiritual beings all throughout these books.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean we have it perfect or what all of these exactly mean, but just trying to point that out to you. So if you have questions about it, different ideas, send us a question.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it.
Yeah. We're still learning too.
Yep.
And like that's part of what the fun is of our jobs, is teaching you, is that we get to learn right alongside you too.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right. Oh yeah. Let's do our
should we make up a spiel right now?
Spiel of like, and this has been
this has been the Unnamed Youth Podcast. Big thank you to Devin and Stevie for helping. I don't know. Devin produces. What does Stevie do? Stevie, what's your job title?
He does
for
the video,
but there's like a better way to say that, right? There's like a more official way.
He puts a bunch of filters to make us look better. This isn't what I would look like.
Yes,
in real life.
Stevie, our Facetune expert.
Is that what it's called? Face tuning?
Facetune. It's like a certain like app that
makes you look better.
Yeah, but
that's wild.
It gets like clowned on because people use it to make them like look really skinny, but then it like warps other parts of the picture. So it's
you can tell in the background, like, oh, why is that TV? Why are the edges of that TV also going in?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you tonight, and you can see what we really look like.
Like in person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.